Is this your signature? Yes or no, Maya? The stack of documents hit the heavy mahogany desk with a sound like a gunshot, the noise echoing violently off the book-lined walls of the Sterling Hotel's private library. Maya flinched physically, her hand instinctively flying to her stomach to protect the secret lives that had been growing there for 8 weeks. She looked up, her large brown eyes wide with confusion, searching for the man who, only 20 minutes ago, had been whispering promises of forever in her ear on the ballroom dance floor. But Caleb Sterling was gone. In his place stood a stranger, a man in a bespoke tuxedo whose jaw was clenched so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. His blue eyes, usually warm with affection and lit with humor, were now cold, dead, and filled with a terrifying mix of heartbreak and rage. "Caleb, please," Maya stammered, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "I don't know what this is. I didn't sign anything. You're scaring me." "Don't lie to me," Caleb roared, his voice cracking with raw pain. He slammed his hand down on the desk again, rattling the vintage Tiffany lamp. "The bank records match, Maya. The IP address matches. You transferred $50,000 of my family's money into your personal account while smiling in my face, while sleeping in my bed." From the shadows of the room, the soft clink of a crystal glass against a coaster cut through the tension. Victoria Sterling stepped into the pool of light cast by the desk lamp. She wore a gown of liquid silver that shimmered like armor, and her face held a look of tragic, practiced satisfaction. "I told you, Caleb," she purred, her voice smooth as expensive poison. "Desperation makes people do ugly things. You wanted to believe she was different, but look at her. She never wanted you. She wanted the payout." Maya looked between them, the man she planned to spend the rest of her life with, and the mother who had orchestrated her destruction. She opened her mouth to scream, "I'm pregnant with your children. I'm carrying your twins." But the look of absolute disgust on Caleb's face stopped the words in her throat. He didn't see a fiancée. He didn't see the mother of his future children. He saw a thief. "Get out," Caleb whispered, turning his back on her, "before I call the police." Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we find out if Maya can survive this heartbreaking betrayal and rise from the ashes, I have a quick favor to ask. If you believe that the truth always comes out in the end, please smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter of this story. Also, I love getting to know this community. Drop a comment down below right now and tell me, where are you watching from today? Are you tuning in from Texas, Toronto, London, or maybe right here in the US? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Now, let's go back to that freezing night in Chicago where the deception began. Only an hour earlier, the night had been perfect. Outside, a ferocious blizzard was burying downtown Chicago in white, turning the city into a frozen, glittering snow globe. But inside the grand ballroom of the Sterling Hotel, the air was warm, scented with expensive perfume, roasting chestnuts and fresh pine. This was the annual Sterling Properties Christmas Gala, the most exclusive event on the Chicago social calendar. Senators, real estate tycoons, and old money families clinked crystal champagne flutes, discussing mergers and zoning laws beneath massive chandeliers that dripped with diamonds. At the center of it all stood Caleb Sterling. At 28, he was the crown prince of Chicago real estate. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell just so over his forehead and a smile that could close a deal in seconds, he was the city's most eligible bachelor. But tonight, he had planned to take himself off the market for good. His hand had drifted into his tuxedo pocket a dozen times that night, his fingers brushing the velvet surface of a small, square box. Inside sat a 3-carat vintage diamond, his grandmother's. He wasn't looking at the debutantes in their designer gowns who were trying to catch his eye. His gaze was fixed on a woman standing near the massive Christmas tree, adjusting a garland. Maya Brooks. She wasn't an heiress. She wasn't a politician's daughter. She was an interior designer, one of the junior leads on the Sterling Hotel renovation project. She wore a simple emerald green silk dress that she likely saved up for months to buy. To Caleb, she outshone every diamond-draped socialite in the room. Her laugh, which he could hear even from across the ballroom, was the only thing that made the high-pressure world of Sterling Properties bearable. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" The voice was like ice cracking on a frozen lake. Caleb had stiffened and turned to see his mother, Victoria Sterling, standing beside him. At 55, Victoria was a terrifyingly elegant woman, the ruthless chairwoman who ran the family empire since Caleb's father died. She ruled the board and her son with an iron fist. "She's the most beautiful woman here," Caleb replied, not backing down. He knew his mother disapproved. Victoria wanted him to marry Vanessa Torp, the daughter of the city comptroller, to secure permits for their new waterfront skyscraper. Victoria took a sip of her champagne, her eyes narrowing as she watched Maya laugh at a waiter's joke. Beauty is a depreciating asset, Caleb. Character, however, that is what builds legacies. Are you sure you know her character? The girl comes from nothing. Her father was a mechanic, her mother cleans houses. People from that world, they have different survival instincts than we do.
"I know her better than anyone," Caleb said, his voice firm. "I'm going to ask her tonight, Mother. The ring is in my pocket. I'd appreciate your blessing, but I don't need it." Victoria didn't frown. She didn't yell. She simply smiled, a thin, shark-like expression that should have warned Caleb of the shark-infested waters he was swimming in. "I see. You're a grown man, Caleb. You make your own choices. But before you make a decision that affects the future of this company, I need you to look at something. Meet me in the library in 10 minutes. It's a board matter."
"Can't it wait?"
"No," Victoria said, turning away. "It concerns the renovation budget and Miss Brooks." Caleb had watched her walk away, a knot forming in his stomach. He looked back at Maya, who caught his eye and smiled, mouthing, "I love you." He relaxed slightly. Whatever game his mother was playing, it wouldn't work. He loved Maya. Nothing could change that. But he was wrong. Now, back in the library, the silence was deafening. The air smelled of old paper, leather, and the impending death of a dream. Caleb stood behind the desk, his hands gripping the edge so tightly his knuckles were white. "I asked you a question, Maya. Did you think I was stupid? Did you think because I was in love with you I wouldn't check the books?" Maya picked up the papers with trembling hands. They were bank transfer records, invoices from the renovation project she was managing, luxury furnishing budgets, marble, silk, gold fixtures, totaling $50,000. But the materials had never been ordered. The money had been transferred. Account holder, Maya Brooks. Date, December 22nd. I didn't do this," Maya whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. "Caleb, look at me. You know me. I clip coupons. I drive a 10-year-old car. Why would I steal from you?" "Because you have student loans," Victoria interjected, stepping closer, her perfume cloying and sweet. "Because your mother's medical bills are piling up. Because you saw an opportunity to skim off the top of a $1 billion project, thinking we wouldn't notice a measly 50 grand. "No!" Maya shouted, finding her voice. She pointed a shaking finger at Victoria. "Caleb, open your eyes. She hates me. She's been trying to get rid of me since the day we met. She's framing me." Caleb looked at his mother. Victoria looked back, the picture of calm, maternal concern. She sighed, a sound of disappointment that cut deeper than any scream. "Oh, Caleb, it breaks my heart that she would stoop this low. To blame me for her own crime? It's pathological. This is exactly why we vet people, darling. This is exactly why we stick to our own kind." Caleb looked back at Maya, and in that moment the trust broke. The years of Victoria whispering in his ear about gold diggers and people who aren't like us took root. He looked at Maya's simple dress, her lack of connections, her desperate need for money to help her sick mother. The logic of the lie was too perfect, too crafted to be ignored. "My mother is protecting this company," Caleb said, his voice turning to ice, "and apparently she's protecting me from making the biggest mistake of my life." "Mistake?" Maya choked out. "Is that what I am to you? A mistake?" "You're a liability," Caleb said, picking up the velvet box from the desk, the ring he was going to give her. He looked at it for a moment, the diamond catching the light, representing a future that was now dead. Then he tossed it into the trash can with a dull thud. "The numbers don't lie, Maya. Get out. You're fired. And if you're not out of Chicago by tomorrow morning, my mother will press charges. You'll go to prison." Maya stood there for a heartbeat longer, staring at his broad back, willing him to turn around, willing him to sense the two tiny heartbeats inside her that were half him. She wanted to scream the truth, to force him to acknowledge his children, but pride stopped her. If he thought she was a thief, he would think she was trapping him with a pregnancy. She wouldn't let him look at her children with that same disgust. "Goodbye, Caleb," she whispered, her voice broken. "One day you're going to realize that you threw away the only person who loved you for you, not your money. and by then it will be too late. She turned and ran. She ran past the security guards who looked at her with pity. She ran past the ballroom filled with laughing billionaires. She burst out the front doors of the hotel into the freezing Chicago night. The blizzard was raging now. The wind bit at her exposed arms, stinging like needles, but Maya was too numb to feel the cold. She stumbled down the sidewalk, her heels slipping on the ice, until she reached the corner of Michigan Avenue. She collapsed against a lamppost, sobbing until her chest ached, the sound of her grief swallowed by the howling wind. Snowflakes caught in her eyelashes, melting against the hot tears streaming down her face. She felt dizzy, the world spinning out of control. She had lost her job, her home, and her love in the span of 30 minutes. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach, resting over the flat silk of her dress. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the darkness, her voice fierce and trembling. "I'm so sorry, my babies. I promised you a father. I promised you a family. I failed you." She took a shivering breath, wiping her face with the back of her hand. The image of the ultrasound she had seen just yesterday flashed in her mind. 2 heartbeats, twin boys. Victoria Sterling had taken her job. She had taken her reputation. She had taken the love of her life, but she would not take her children. She would not let those innocent boys be raised by a woman who viewed people as assets and liabilities. "We don't need him," Maya said, straightening her spine against the bitter wind. "We don't need his money or his name. I will build a world for you myself." She hailed a cab, her movements sharp and determined. She wasn't going to prison. She was going to disappear. She would go as far away as she could. Texas, maybe. Somewhere warm. Somewhere the name Sterling meant nothing. As the taillights of the cab faded into the snowy night, Maya didn't look back at the hotel tower looming above her. The girl who entered that cab was gone. The woman who would emerge in Texas would be made of steel, forged in the fire of this betrayal. Caleb Sterling had made his choice. Now he would have to live with the silence he had created.
8 years. 8 years, 3 months, and 4 days. That was exactly how long it had been since Caleb Sterling had felt the cold bite of the Chicago wind on his face as he watched Maya run away. To the outside world, the last decade had been the golden age of Sterling Properties. Caleb had taken his father's legacy and turned it into an empire that spanned the continent. He was the face of American real estate, a man who graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune, usually photographed in Italian suits that cost more than most people's cars. He was richer than God, sharper than a razor, and terrified his competitors. But inside the glass-walled penthouse of the Sterling Tower, the air was suffocating. Caleb stood by the window, staring out at the gray expanse of Lake Michigan. He was 36 now, and the years had hardened him. The boyish charm that had once won Maya's heart was gone, replaced by a steely intensity that kept everyone at arm's length. He was efficient, he was ruthless, and he was completely alone. "Mr. Sterling?" Caleb didn't turn around. He watched his reflection in the glass, a ghost in a Tom Ford suit. "What is it, Marcus?" His personal assistant cleared his throat nervously. Marcus had been with him for 5 years and still looked terrified every time he had to deliver news. "The jet is fueled and waiting at O'Hare. The acquisition team is already on board. If we want to secure the buyout of Nexus before their IPO launches next week, we need to be on the ground in Austin by noon." Sigh. Caleb checked his watch. It was a Patek Philippe, a gift from his mother for his 35th birthday. It felt heavy on his wrist, like a shackle. "Let's get this over with," Caleb said, turning from the window. "I want to walk into that room, put a check on the table that they can't refuse, strip the company for its patents, and be back in Chicago before the market opens tomorrow." "Of course, sir," Marcus said, hurrying to keep up with Caleb's long strides. "Although the dossier on the Nexus CEO is sparse. She's notoriously private. No photos, no interviews. They say she runs the company like a fortress." "I don't care if she runs it like a circus," Caleb said coldly, pressing the elevator button. "Everyone has a price, Marcus. It's just a matter of finding out how many zeros it takes to make them sell their soul. I learned that lesson a long time ago." 3 hours later, the Gulfstream touched down on the tarmac in Austin, Texas. The moment the cabin door opened, the heat hit Caleb like a physical blow. It was a dry, relentless heat, smelling of dust and ozone, a stark contrast to the sterile, air-conditioned chill of his life in Chicago. He loosened his tie instinctively, feeling a bead of sweat trickle down his back.
A fleet of black SUVs was waiting to transport them to the Nexus headquarters. As they drove through the Texas hill country, the landscape shifted from dusty plains to a lush, futuristic oasis. Nexus wasn't just an office building, it was a statement. Nestled into the rolling hills, the campus was a marvel of glass, polished concrete, and vertical gardens. Solar panels glinted in the sun, and the entire structure seemed to hum with energy. It was vibrant, alive, and innovative. Everything Sterling Properties, with its old brick and rigid traditions, was not. "Impressive," Caleb muttered as the SUV pulled up to the main entrance. "They specialize in intuitive smart home technology, systems that learn a family's habits to maximize comfort and safety. They say the Nexus AI can predict what you need before you even know you need it." "So they're the cap tax," Caleb scoffed. "A glorified thermostat. We're buying the user data, not the toys." They were ushered past security by a team of smiling, casually dressed employees who looked nothing like the terrified staff back in Chicago. They were led to the executive wing, culminating in a massive boardroom at the very top of the facility. The room was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Austin skyline in the distance. The table was made of reclaimed wood, long and sleek. But what caught Caleb's eye was the silence. The room was empty. "She's keeping us waiting." Caleb checked his watch again. His jaw tightened. "I don't wait, Marcus. Go find someone and tell them." The heavy oak doors at the far end of the room clicked open. "I apologize for the delay, gentlemen," a Vaval voice said. It wasn't the voice of a stranger. It was a sound from a ghost story. Smooth, confident, with a husky timbre that used to whisper to him in the dark. It sent a shiver down his spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Caleb turned slowly, his breath catching in his throat. Walking towards the head of the table was a woman who commanded the very air in the room. She was wearing a tailored white power suit that made her skin glow against the stark fabric. Her hair, which he remembered as a wild mane of curls, was now blown out into sleek, glossy waves that cascaded over her shoulders. She wore towering red stilettos that clicked rhythmically against the polished concrete floor. But it was her eyes, those deep, intelligent, amber-brown eyes that pinned him to the spot. "Maya," Caleb whispered. The name scraped out of his throat like a jagged stone, painful and impossible. She didn't flinch. She didn't stumble. She walked to the head of the table, placed a slim tablet down, and looked at him with an expression of utter, chilling indifference. "Mr. Sterling," she said, "welcome to Nexus." The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus and the rest of the acquisition team looked between their boss and this woman, confused by the tension that had suddenly sucked all the oxygen out of the room. "You," Caleb stumbled, his arrogant mask shattering for the first time in a decade. He took a step forward, his hand reaching out instinctively. "You're the CEO?" "Founding CEO and majority shareholder," Maya said calmly. She gestured to the empty chairs. "Please, sit. I assume you flew all this way to make me an offer, not to stare at me like you've seen a phantom." "Maya, how is this?" Caleb shook his head, trying to reconcile the memory of the weeping girl in the snow with the Titan standing before him. "You're supposed to be in prison?" Maya finished for him, a wry smile touching her lips, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Or perhaps destitute, waiting tables in a diner somewhere, regretting the day I crossed the great Sterling family."
"I thought you were gone," Caleb said, his voice dropping to a hush. "I did go," she replied. "I went as far away as I could. I came here. I stopped designing living rooms for rich people and started designing systems to protect them. It turns out, when you lose your own sense of safety, you become very good at building it for others." Caleb stared at her. The intelligence was the same. The beauty was the same, if not more refined by age and money, but the warmth was gone. The Maya who used to leave sticky notes on his bathroom mirror and dance in the kitchen while making pancakes was dead. In her place was a woman made of steel. "Everyone out," Caleb said, never taking his eyes off her. "Sir?" Marcus squeaked. "Get out," Caleb barked, the command echoing off the glass walls. "Leave us." His team scrambled for the door, looking terrified. Maya didn't object. She simply nodded to her own assistant, who quietly exited, closing the heavy doors behind her. Alone. For the first time in 8 years, they were alone.
Caleb walked toward the table, his hands trembling slightly. Nexus. Connection. Is that some kind of joke? It's a philosophy, Maya said, leaning back in her leather chair. Something you wouldn't understand. Why are you here, Caleb? You know why I'm here. I'm here to buy your company. And you thought you could just walk in, wave a check, and I would hand over my life's work? Maya laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You really haven't changed, have you? You still think money is the only language people speak. It's $1 billion, Maya. Caleb slammed his hand on the table, the frustration boiling over. Do you have any idea what that kind of money represents? I have money, Caleb. Look around you. I built this. I didn't inherit it from Daddy. I didn't marry into it. I built it with nothing but the severance check you threw at me and the spite you left me with. I don't need your money. Then what do you want? Caleb demanded. Revenge? Is that what this is? You lured me here to humiliate me? I didn't lure you anywhere, Maya said, standing up. She was shorter than him, but in that moment she felt 10 feet tall. You came to me. You needed me. Your company is stagnating, Caleb. Your dinosaur technology in a digital world. You came here because you need my brain, my patents, my innovation. But the answer is no. You can't just say no to a merger this size without, I can, she interrupted, her voice sharp as a whip, because I own 51% of the voting stock, and I would burn this building to the ground before I let a Sterling put his name on it. She gathered her tablet, her movements precise and dismissive. The meeting is over. You can find your own way out. Maya, wait. Caleb moved to block her path. He was close to her now, close enough to smell her perfume, something floral and spicy, sophisticated. It made his head spin. We need to talk about that night, about what happened. There is nothing to talk about, Maya said, her face closing up like a vault door. You made your choice. You chose a spreadsheet over my character. You chose your mother's lies over our love. You accused me of being a thief. She stepped closer, invading his personal space, her eyes blazing with 8 years of suppressed anger. Well, you were right about one thing, Caleb. I did steal something that night. Caleb frowned, confusion warring with the pain in his chest. What? The $50,000? I don't care about the money, Maya. I never did. No, she whispered, her voice dropping to a dangerous level. I stole something much more valuable, but you were too blind to notice. Before he could ask what she meant, a loud boom of thunder shook the room. The sky outside, which had been bright blue only an hour ago, was now a bruising shade of purple and black. Rain began to lash against the glass sheets, blurring the view of the hills. Maya checked her watch and frowned. You should go. The storm is getting worse. Caleb's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, distracting him from her cryptic words. It was Marcus. Text. Sir, the pilot just called. Air traffic control has grounded all flights out of Austin. Tornado watch in effect. We're stuck here until tomorrow morning. Caleb looked up from the phone, a strange mix of frustration and relief washing over him. My flight is grounded. I'm stuck in Austin. Maya stared at him for a long moment. He saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Panic? Fear? It was gone before he could be sure. There's a Four Seasons downtown, she said coldly, stepping around him. I suggest you check in before they book up. Goodbye, Mr. Sterling. This isn't over, Maya, Caleb called out as she reached the door. I'm not leaving until I get what I came for. Maya paused with her hand on the handle. She didn't look back. You already lost the only thing that mattered, Caleb. You just don't know it yet. She walked out, the door clicking shut behind her with a finality that echoed in the empty room. Caleb stood alone in the darkening boardroom, the storm raging outside matching the turmoil inside. She was hiding something. He could feel it in the way she held herself, in the cryptic comments she made. He walked to the window, watching the rain assault the lush gardens of the campus below. He saw Maya exit the building, holding a large umbrella. She didn't walk toward the parking lot. Instead, she hurried toward a separate, colorful building adjacent to the main office. Caleb narrowed his eyes. The daycare center. He watched as she disappeared inside. Why would the CEO be going to the daycare in the middle of a workday? Caleb Sterling had made his fortune by noticing the details that others missed, and as he watched the lights flicker on in the daycare building through the driving rain, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to the Four Seasons. Not yet. He had a mystery to solve, and this time he wouldn't let his mother or his pride get in the way of the truth.
The storm that had battered Austin throughout the night had finally exhausted itself, leaving behind a city that sparkled under a harsh, clean morning sun. Puddles reflected the glass towers of downtown, and the air smelled of wet pavement and cedar. Caleb Sterling sat at a corner table in the Roasted Bean, an upscale coffee shop just blocks away from the Nexus headquarters. He hadn't slept. His suite at the Four Seasons was luxurious, Egyptian cotton sheets, silence, a view of the river, but his mind had been too loud to rest. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Maya, not the weeping girl in the snow, but the woman in the white power suit, the way she held her head, the cold fire in her eyes, and that cryptic parting shot. "I stole something much more valuable." "Black coffee, 2 sugars," the waitress said, sliding a ceramic mug onto his table, snapping him out of his trance. "Thank you," Caleb murmured, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. He took a sip, the caffeine doing little to clear the fog in his brain. He checked his phone. Marcus had texted, "Flights are back up. We can be wheels up by 1 p.m. Do you want me to prep the final offer for Nexus?" Caleb started to type yes, but stopped. He looked out the window. Across the street, there was a small park, lush and green from the rain. A woman was walking along the path, holding hands with 2 children. Caleb's heart performed a strange, painful stutter. It was Maya. She was dressed casually today, wearing dark jeans, a beige trench coat, and white sneakers. She looked younger, softer, more like the girl he remembered from Chicago. She was laughing at something one of the children had said, her head thrown back in pure, unguarded joy. Caleb found himself standing up before he had even made the conscious decision to move. He threw a $20 bill on the table and walked out of the coffee shop, drawn toward the park like a moth to a flame. He told himself he was just going to talk to her one last time, to get closure, to ask her what she meant about stealing something. He crossed the street, his dress shoes splashing through puddles he didn't even see. As he got closer, the sounds of the morning became clearer. Birds chirping, traffic humming, and the high-pitched, excited voices of children. "Mommy, look, a worm!" "Don't touch it, Leo, it's slimy." "Liam, don't be a chicken, it's cool." Caleb froze near a large oak tree, hidden partially by the trunk. He was close enough now to see them clearly. 2 boys, identical twins. They were dressed in matching blue raincoats and yellow boots. They had dark, messy hair that curled slightly at the ends in the humidity. They were bundles of kinetic energy, jumping over puddles and chasing each other around a bench where Maya sat down. Caleb watched, transfixed. He saw the boy named Leo trip over his own feet, tumbling onto the wet grass. Caleb took a step forward, an instinctive urge to help rising in his chest, but he stopped when he saw Leo sit up. The boy didn't cry. He brushed the dirt off his knees, furrowed his brow in intense concentration, and tilted his head to the side as he inspected a scrape on his hand. The air left Caleb's lungs in a rush. That tilt, that specific angle of the head when analyzing a problem. Caleb did that. Caleb had done that his entire life. His mother used to scold him in photos. He looked closer. He looked at their profiles as the sun hit their faces, the strong, straight nose, the distinct cleft in the chin, the shape of their eyes. It was like looking into a time machine. He wasn't looking at strangers. He was looking at himself at 8 years old. The world tilted on its axis. The noise of the traffic faded away. The humidity vanished. All Caleb could feel was a cold, clarifying shock that started in his toes and shot straight up to his brain. "I stole something much more valuable." "Oh my God," Caleb whispered. He stepped out from behind the tree. He didn't care about the mud on his Italian shoes. He didn't care about the optics. He walked onto the grass, his eyes locked on the 2 boys. Maya. Her name wasn't a question this time. It was an accusation. Maya's head snapped up. When she saw him standing there, the blood drained from her face so fast, Caleb thought she might faint. She jumped to her feet, her maternal instinct kicking in instantly. She moved between him and the boys, spreading her arms slightly as if shielding them from a predator. "Caleb," breathed Maya, "what are you doing here?" "Who are they?" Caleb asked, his voice trembling. He pointed a shaking finger at the twins, who had stopped playing and now were staring at the tall stranger with wide, curious eyes. "They're my sons," Maya said, her voice tight. "Go away, Caleb." "How old?"
Caleb demanded, taking another step closer. "How old are they, Maya?" "Does it matter?" "It matters," Caleb shouted, his control snapping. "Look at them! Look at their faces!" The shout scared the boys. The one named Liam hid behind Maya's leg, but Leo, the one who had fallen, stepped forward, his little chin jutting out in a gesture of defiance that was heartbreakingly familiar. "Don't yell at my mommy," Leo said, his voice small but brave. Caleb looked down at the boy. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. It was irrefutable. The boy had Caleb's eyes, that specific shade of piercing icy blue that was a Sterling family trademark. Caleb dropped to his knees in the wet grass. He was now at eye level with the child. "I'm not," Caleb choked, his throat closing up. "I'm not going to hurt her, I promise." He looked at Leo, then at Liam. He looked for a long time, drinking in every detail. The curve of their ears, the way their hair fell, the intelligence in their gaze. 8, Caleb whispered, looking up at Maya. "They're 8 years old, aren't they?" Maya didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence was the answer. "You were pregnant," Caleb said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow to the gut. "That night, in Chicago, in the library, when I threw you out." Tears welled up in Maya's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Yes." Caleb felt like he was going to sick. The memory of that night replayed in his mind, but now with a horrifying new context. He remembered how she had held her stomach when he slammed the papers down. He remembered how she had pleaded with him. He remembered sending her out into a blizzard while she was carrying his children. "Why didn't you tell me?" Caleb asked, his voice breaking. He stood up, towering over her again, his anguish turning into anger. "I have sons? I have twins? And you hid them for 8 years?"
"I didn't hide them," Maya hissed, stepping closer so the boys wouldn't hear the details. "I protected them." "Protected them from what? From their father?" "From the man who called their mother a thief," Maya returned, her voice low and venomous. "You want to know why I didn't tell you? Because that night you looked at me with such disgust. I knew that if I told you I was pregnant, you wouldn't see it as a miracle. You would see it as a trap." "That's not true," Caleb protested, though the doubt gnawed at him. "Isn't it?" Maya challenged. "Your mother was standing right there, Caleb, Victoria Sterling. Do you think she would have let me raise the Sterling heirs? She would have taken them. She would have used her lawyers and her money to prove I was an unfit mother, a criminal, and she would have taken my babies away from me." Caleb opened his mouth to argue, but the words died on his tongue. He thought of his mother. He thought of her ruthlessness. He thought of how she had handed him those bank records with a smile. "She's protecting the company," he had said. Maya was right. Victoria would have destroyed Maya to get custody of the heirs. "So you stole them," Caleb said, the bitterness coating his tongue. "You stole 8 years, their first steps, their first words. You let me live in that empty penthouse, miserable and alone, while you raised my family in secret." "I gave them a home," Maya said fiercely, "a happy home. They don't know what it's like to be judged by their bank account. They don't know what it's like to have a grandmother who values zoning permits over human beings. They are kind, Caleb. They are happy, and they are mine." "They are ours," Caleb corrected. He looked back at the boys. Leo was watching him with intense curiosity. "Who is he, Mommy? Is he a friend?" Maya hesitated. She looked at Caleb, and for a second she saw the conflict raging behind her eyes. She could lie. She could say he was a client, a stranger, nobody. She could take them and run. But Maya Brooks was not a liar. That was the mistake Caleb had made 8 years ago. He had forgotten who she was. "He's..." Maya's voice wavered. She took a deep breath. "He's someone I used to know a long time ago." It wasn't the truth, but it wasn't a lie. Caleb looked at his sons. He wanted to scoop them up. He wanted to buy them everything in the world. He wanted to beg their forgiveness, but he knew he couldn't. Not yet. He was a stranger to them, a scary man in a suit shouting in a park. "I'm not leaving," Caleb said quietly to Maya. "Caleb, don't do this." "I'm not leaving Austin," Caleb repeated, his voice gaining the iron strength that had built his empire. "Cancel the flight, Maya. Tell your security to expect me, because I am not going anywhere." "You have no rights here," Maya said, her chin lifting. "You signed the birth certificates? No. You paid child support? No. You are a stranger."
I am their father, and I'm going to prove that I didn't know. I'm going to prove that I was lied to just like you were." "What are you talking about?" "My mother," Caleb said, the realization crystallizing in his mind. "She set us up, Maya. The bank transfer, the investigation, it was all too perfect. I was too young and too stupid to see it then, but I see it now." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I'm going to find the proof," Caleb vowed. "I'm going to clear your name, and then we are going to talk about custody." Maya's eyes widened in fear. "Is that a threat? Are you going to drag us into court?" "No," Caleb said, softening as he looked at the boys one last time. Liam waved at him shyly. Caleb offered a small, broken wave back. "It's a promise," Caleb said. "I lost you because I was blind. I'm not going to lose them, too." He turned and walked away before he shattered completely. He walked back toward the street, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Liam, he had sons, he had a legacy, he had a reason to live. He pulled out his phone and dialed Marcus. "Sir?" Marcus answered on the first ring. "Are we heading to the airport?" "No," Caleb said, his voice cold and hard. "Cancel the flight. Book the suite for another week, probably a month." "Sir, the board meeting in Chicago." "Cancel it," Caleb barked. "And Marcus, get me the number for the best forensic accountant in Illinois, someone who isn't on the Sterling payroll, someone who hates my mother." I don't understand, sir." "I need to dig up a grave, Marcus. I need to find out exactly how my mother framed Maya Bruce 8 years ago, and when I find the smoking gun, I'm going to use it to blow Sterling Properties apart." Caleb hung up the phone. The sadness was gone. The regret was being shoveled into a furnace, fueling a rage that burned hotter than the Texas sun. He had missed 8 years. He wouldn't miss 8 years in one day. Back in the park, Maya ushered the boys toward the car, her hands shaking so badly she dropped her keys twice. "Mommy, why was that man sad?" Liam asked as he buckled his seatbelt. He made a mistake a long time ago, honey," Maya said, glancing in the rearview mirror to make sure Caleb wasn't following them. "Is he the prince?" Leo asked suddenly. Maya froze. "What?" "The story," Leo said, his blue eyes too perceptive, too smart. "Is he that?" Maya looked at her son. She couldn't lie to those eyes. "Yes, baby," she whispered. "That's him." "He doesn't look like a prince," Liam noted, looking out the window. "He looks like a boss." "He is a boss," Maya said, starting the engine. "But he's wrong about one thing." "What?" "He thinks he can just walk back into the story, but he doesn't know that the Queen is still watching." Maya pulled out of the parking lot, her mind racing. Caleb was staying. He was investigating, and if Victoria Sterling found out that Caleb had discovered the twins, she wouldn't just send fake bank transfers this time. She would come for blood. Maya needed to be ready. She wasn't just a designer anymore. She was a CEO, and if the Sterlings wanted a war, she would give them one. But deep down, a terrifying thought took root in her heart. What if he finds the proof? What if he clears my name? Can I ever forgive the man who broke my heart, even if he gives me back my honor? She looked at the boys in the rearview mirror, miniature versions of the man she had never stopped loving, and didn't have an answer. The flight from Austin to Chicago was the longest of Caleb Sterling's life. He sat alone in the cabin of his private jet, staring at a photograph on his phone. It was a grainy, zoomed-in shot he had taken in the park before leaving, Maya, Leo, and Liam walking away from him. It was the only proof he had that he wasn't losing his mind. "We land in 20 minutes, sir," the pilot announced over the intercom. Caleb locked the phone and stared out the window. The Chicago skyline rose from the horizon like a jagged row of teeth. He was returning to the belly of the beast. He had promised Maya he wouldn't return until he had proof, and Caleb Sterling was a man who kept his promises, even if he was 8 years late on this one. "Marcus," Caleb said, not turning from the window. His assistant looked up from his laptop. "Sir? Did you find him?" "Yes, sir. Arthur Pym. He was the head of IT security for Sterling Properties 8 years ago. He was fired 2 weeks after Miss Brooks left." "Fired?" Caleb raised an eyebrow. "My mother told me he retired to Florida." "According to the records, he was terminated for gross negligence, but he's still in Chicago," Marcus said, hesitating. "He works at a computer repair shop in Bucktown, a bit of a come-down for a chief security officer." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Set up the meeting, tonight, off the books." The repair shop smelled of ozone and stale cigarette smoke. It was a tiny, cramped space cluttered with the carcasses of old laptops and tangled wires. Arthur Pym sat behind the counter, looking 20 years older than Caleb remembered. He was balding, with grease stains on his shirt and a bitterness etched into the lines of his face. When the bell above the door chimed and Caleb walked in, bringing with him the cold wind and the aura of extreme wealth, Pym didn't look surprised. He just sighed. "I wondered when you'd finally show up," Pym said, not looking up from the motherboard he was soldering. "Took you long enough. 8 years? You're slower than your father." Caleb walked to the counter, placing a heavy envelope on the glass. "I'm not here to reminisce, Arthur. I'm here for the truth." Pym eyed the envelope. He knew what was inside. Sterling money. It's got a distinct smell, usually blood. "It's a consulting fee," Caleb said smoothly. "For one night's work. I need to know about the transfer. December 22nd, 8 years ago. $50,000 from the renovation budget to Maya Brooks." Pym put down the soldering iron. He looked at Caleb, his eyes watery and tired. "You think she stole it?" Caleb said, his voice hard. "I know she didn't, but I need to prove who did it." Pym laughed, a dry, hacking sound. "You know who did it, kid. You just don't want to say her name." He reached under the counter and pulled out a small, battered USB drive. "Your mother, Victoria. She called me into her office at 2 a.m. the night before the gala. She gave me Maya's payroll info. She told me to make the transfer look like a clumsy hack, something easy to trace." "And you did it," Caleb said, his hands curling into fists. "I have a daughter with medical bills, Caleb. Victoria threatened to cancel my health insurance if I didn't comply. Then, once I did the dirty work, she fired me anyway to tie up the loose end." Pym slid the USB drive across the counter. "I kept this. Insurance. It's the original server log. It shows the transfer originated from Victoria's terminal, authorized by her biometric login. It proves Maya was framed." Caleb picked up the drive. It was light, plastic, insignificant, but it held the weight of 8 lost years. It held his son's childhoods. "Why didn't you come to me?" Caleb asked quietly. "Because you were her puppet. You worshipped the ground she walked on. If I had told you, you would have run straight to Mommy and I would have ended up in prison or worse. But now," Pym looked at Caleb's face, seeing the rage burning there, "now you look like a man who's ready to kill the king." "The queen," Caleb corrected, pocketing the drive. "Thank you, Arthur." Across the city, in the penthouse of the Sterling Tower, Victoria Sterling was sipping herbal tea and looking at a series of high-resolution photographs spread across her dining table. They weren't photos of buildings or board members. They were photos of a park in Austin, Texas. A private investigator stood nervously by the door. "We tracked him via his credit card usage, Mrs. Sterling. He spent 2 days in Austin. He canceled his return flight yesterday, then suddenly rebooked for tonight." Victoria picked up a photo. It showed Caleb on his knees in the grass talking to a small boy. She picked up another, a close-up of the boy's face. The teacup rattled as she set it back on the saucer. Victoria Sterling rarely felt fear. She felt ambition, she felt disdain, she felt triumph, but as she looked at the face of Leo Brooks, she felt a cold knot of terror tighten in her stomach. The boy was a Sterling. The cleft chin, the eyes, the posture, it was undeniable. "He has sons," Victoria whispered, the realization crashing over her. "That little gutter rat, she hid heirs from me." She stood up, pacing the room. This was a catastrophe. If Caleb knew, and judging by the photos he definitely knew, then her control over him was broken. He would bring Maya back, he would install her as the lady of the house, and worse, he would let those children be raised by a commoner, infecting the Sterling bloodline with middle-class mediocrity. "What are your instructions, ma'am?" the investigator asked.
Victoria stopped pacing. Her eyes hardened into shards of flint. She wasn't going to lose. She had built this dynasty, and she would protect it, even from her own son. "Get me my lawyer," she commanded, "the aggressive one, and book me a flight to Austin." "You're going to Texas?" "I'm going to retrieve my property," Victoria said coldly. "Those children belong to the Sterling estate. If their mother is a criminal, which, according to our records, she is, then she has no right to custody." She picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in 8 years. In Austin, the storm had returned. Maya was in her kitchen, making grilled cheese sandwiches for the twins. The house was cozy, filled with the smell of butter and the sound of the rain, but Maya felt a creeping dread she couldn't shake.
Leo and Liam were at the table, drawing pictures. "I'm drawing the boss man," Liam said, holding up a crayon drawing of a stick figure in a suit. "He needs a sword." "He's not a knight, Liam," Leo argued. "He was sad. Knights aren't sad." Maya's phone rang. It was a Chicago area code. Her heart stopped. She wiped her hands on a towel and picked it up. "Hello?" "Hello, my dear." The voice was elegant, refined, and terrifying. It transported Maya instantly back to the library, to the smell of old paper and betrayal. "Victoria!" Maya whispered. The boys looked up at the change in her tone. Maya turned her back to them, whispering fiercely, "Don't you ever call this number." "Oh, don't be dramatic, Maya. It's tedious," Victoria sighed. "I've seen the photos. Lovely boys, strong genes. It's a shame they're being raised in, well, Texas." "Stay away from my children," Maya warned, her hand gripping the counter so hard her knuckles turned white. "My grandchildren," Victoria corrected, "and I'm afraid I have some bad news for you. My lawyers are filing for emergency custody in the morning. Given your history of, shall we say, financial indiscretion, and the fact that you fled the state to hide the children from their father, I don't like your chances in family court." "You framed me!" Maya shouted, forgetting to whisper. "I didn't steal anything." "Prove it," Victoria said softly. "The official record says you're a thief, and the courts don't like thieves raising billionaires. I'm coming for them, Maya. I'm going to take them. I'm going to bring them to Chicago, and I'm going to raise them to be proper sterlings. You'll never see them again." The line went dead. Maya dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, startling the boys. "Mommy?" Leo asked, his voice trembling. "What's wrong?" Maya spun around. She looked at her sons, her beautiful, innocent boys. The panic clawed at her throat. Victoria was coming. She had the money, the lawyers, and the lies to take them away. "Pack your bags," Maya said, her voice shaking. "Boys, go pack your backpacks, now." "Where are we going?" Liam cried. "We're leaving." Maya grabbed her purse. She didn't know where. She just knew she had to run. A knock pounded on the front door. Maya froze. Had she sent the police already? Was it Victoria's hired goons? She grabbed a steak knife from the counter, holding it behind her back. "Stay there," she ordered the boys. She walked to the door, peering through the peephole. It was Caleb. He was soaked to the bone, rain dripping from his dark hair, his chest heaving as if he had run all the way from the airport. Maya threw the door open, the knife still clutched in her hand. "Get away from here! She called me! She's trying to take them!" Caleb looked at the knife, then at Maya's terrified face. He stepped inside, kicking the door shut against the wind. He didn't look like the cold businessman anymore. He looked like a man who had walked through fire. "Put the knife down, Maya," his voice breathless but steady. "She knows," Maya sobbed. "Victoria knows. She's filing for custody. She says I'm a criminal. She's going to take my babies." Caleb reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out the battered USB drive Arthur Pym had given him. "She can't," Caleb said, holding the drive up like a talisman. "What is that?" "The truth," Caleb said, his eyes burning with a fierce protective light. "It's the server log from 8 years ago. It proves she framed you. It proves she committed fraud, embezzlement, and forgery." Maya stared at the small plastic drive. Her knees gave out, and she slumped against the wall. Caleb caught her before she hit the floor, his arms wrapping around her for the first time in a decade. He smelled of rain and cold air and safety. "She's not taking anyone," Caleb whispered in her hair. "She's not going to win, Maya, because tomorrow morning I'm not just going to confront her, I'm going to destroy her." He pulled back to look at her, then over her shoulder at the 2 terrified little boys peeking around the corner of the hallway. Caleb Sterling looked at his sons. "Pack your bags," Caleb said, but his voice was gentle. "We're going to Chicago. All of us." "To Chicago?" Maya asked, wiping her tears. "To her?" "No," Caleb said, his jaw setting in a line of granite. "To the boardroom. It's time for a hostile takeover." The elevator ride to the 40th floor of the Sterling Tower was silent, save for the hum of the machinery and the nervous shuffling of small feet. Maya stood in the corner of the mirrored box, clutching the hand of Leo, while Caleb held Liam. The boys were wide-eyed, staring at the gold-plated buttons and the plush velvet carpet. To them, this wasn't a corporate battlefield, it was a castle. "Are we going to see the Queen now?" Leo whispered, looking up at his father. Caleb tightened his grip on his son's hand, his jaw set in a line of granite. "Yes, Leo, but remember what I told you. The Queen doesn't have any power anymore. Not over us." Maya looked at Caleb. He was wearing the same suit he had worn in Austin, slightly rumpled now, but he looked more formidable than she had ever seen him. For 8 years she had feared this building. She had feared the woman who sat at the top of it. But standing next to Caleb, feeling the heat of his anger radiating off him, she realized she wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready. The elevator dinged softly. The doors slid open. "Marcus," Caleb said to his assistant, who was waiting in the lobby with a look of terrified anticipation, "take the boys to my office. Put on cartoons. Order them whatever they want from the kitchen. Ice cream, burgers, everything." "Yes, sir," Marcus said. He looked at the twins, miniature replicas of his boss, and his eyes widened, but he knew better than to ask questions. "Right this way, guys. I think we have a secret stash of gummy bears." Maya knelt down, kissing both boys on the forehead. "You go with Marcus, okay? Mommy and Daddy have to go have a grown-up talk. We'll be back in 10 minutes. "Mommy and Daddy," Caleb repeated softly as the boys scampered away. The words sounded foreign and wonderful on his tongue. He offered Maya his arm. "Ready?" Maya straightened her blazer. She wasn't the intern anymore. She was the CEO of Nexus. She took his arm. "Let's finish this." Inside the main boardroom, Victoria Sterling stood at the head of the massive oak table. The entire board of directors was assembled, 12 old men in gray suits who had been terrified of her for decades. "The motion is simple," Victoria said, her voice crisp and commanding. "We are initiating a hostile takeover of Nexus Technologies. Furthermore, I have instructed our legal team to file for emergency custody of the illegitimate heirs that have been discovered in Texas. We must protect the Sterling bloodline from being raised in a substandard environment." She smiled, a cold, triumphant expression. "We own the company, and we own the children. It is a clean sweep." "Is it?" The heavy double doors banged open. Every head in the room swiveled. Caleb strode in, Maya right beside him. The energy in the room shifted instantly. It was no longer a board meeting. It was a gladiatorial arena. Victoria's smile faltered, but only for a second. "Caleb, you're late, and I see you've brought guests. This is a closed meeting." "I'm the CEO, Mother," Caleb said, walking calmly to the opposite end of the table. "There are no closed meetings for me." "And her?" Victoria pointed a manicured finger at Maya. "Security, remove this woman. She is a known embezzler and currently a defendant in a custody lawsuit." "I'm not a defendant," Maya said, her voice ringing clear and strong across the room. "I'm the majority shareholder of the company you're trying to steal, and I'm the mother of the grandchildren you're trying to kidnap." A murmur of shock rippled through the board members. "Kidnap is such an ugly word," Victoria sneered. "I am simply rescuing my son's children from a thief. We all remember what happened 8 years ago, Maya. The $50,000, the bank records." "Yes," Caleb interrupted. "Let's talk about the records." He pulled the small, battered USB drive from his pocket. He plugged it into the smartboard system at the front of the room. "What are you doing?" Victoria demanded, her voice rising an octave. "Caleb, stop this childishness immediately." "It's not childishness, Mother. It's forensics." Caleb tapped the screen. A document appeared. It was complex, lines of code, server logs, and timestamps, but Caleb highlighted a specific section in red. "Gentlemen of the board," Caleb addressed the table. 8 years ago, my fiancé was accused of stealing $50,000. I was shown bank transfers that seemed to prove her guilt, but I made a mistake. I trusted the source of those documents. He pointed to the screen. "This is the original server log from the night of the transfer. As you can see, the command to move the funds didn't come from Maya's computer. It came from the executive terminal in the penthouse." The board members leaned in. "Specifically," Caleb continued, his voice cold as liquid nitrogen, "it was authorized by user ID V/Sterling admin." Victoria's face went white. She gripped the back of her chair. That is fabricated. He's lying. He's trying to protect her. There's more, Caleb said relentlessly. He swiped the screen. A new document appeared. This is an email chain between Victoria Sterling and Arthur Pym, our former head of security. In it, she explicitly threatens to cancel her daughter's medical coverage if he doesn't falsify the logs to frame Maya Brooks. The room was deadly silent. This wasn't just family drama. This was corporate malfeasance. This was blackmail. This was a felony. You framed her, Caleb said, looking directly at his mother. You framed an innocent woman because you didn't like her pedigree. You robbed me of my wife. You robbed me of 8 years with my sons, and you exposed this company to massive liability. Victoria looked around the room. She saw the faces of the board members, men she had bullied for decades, turning away from her. She saw the disgust. She saw the end.
I did it for you, Victoria screamed, her poise finally shattering. I did it for the family. She wasn't one of us, Caleb. She would have dragged you down to her level. I was protecting the legacy. You didn't protect the legacy, Caleb said quietly. You destroyed it. He pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket and slid it down the long table. It spun across the polished wood and came to a stop right in front of Victoria. What is this? She whispered. It's a choice, Caleb said. Option A, you resign immediately from the board. You surrender all voting rights and you retire to your estate in Florida. You will have 0 contact with me, Maya, or the boys. Ever. Victoria stared at him, her lips trembling. And option B? Option B, Caleb said, leaning forward, his eyes blazing. I hand this USB drive to the district attorney. You go to prison for embezzlement, fraud, and blackmail. And I let the press know exactly why the great Victoria Sterling is wearing an orange jumpsuit. The silence stretched for an eternity. Victoria looked at the document. She looked at Maya, who was standing tall, looking not vengeful, but simply done. She looked at her son and realized for the first time that she had created a man she couldn't control. With a shaking hand, Victoria picked up a pen. She signed the resignation letter. She threw the pen down. You're a fool, Caleb. You're trading an empire for a sentiment. I'm trading a prison for a life, Caleb replied. Get out. Victoria Sterling, the woman who had ruled Chicago real estate for 30 years, picked up her purse. She walked past the board members who refused to meet her eye. She walked past Maya, pausing for just a second to glare, but Maya didn't flinch. When the door closed behind her, the tension in the room snapped. Mr. Sterling, the vice chairman cleared his throat, regarding the acquisition of Nexus. There will be no acquisition, Caleb said, turning to look at Maya. However, Ms. Brooks and I have discussed a partnership. Sterling Properties will be the exclusive licensor of Nexus technology. We will modernize our buildings, and Nexus will gain a national platform. It will be a merger of equals. He looked at Maya. Is that acceptable to the CEO? Maya smiled, a real smile, the first one that had reached her eyes in 8 years. It's acceptable, but the branding stays Nexus. I'm not changing the name. Agreed. Meeting adjourned. 10 minutes later, Caleb and Maya walked into his private office. The scene that greeted them was chaos. Marcus was sitting on the floor, wearing a tie that was crooked, surrounded by burger wrappers. Leo was wearing Caleb's spare suit jacket, which swallowed him whole, and Liam was spinning in the executive chair, laughing hysterically. "Daddy!" Liam shouted, stopping the chair. "Marcus let us eat 2 burgers." Caleb laughed. It was a rusty sound, something he hadn't used in a long time, but it felt good. "You guys okay?" "We're great," Leo said. "Did you talk to the Queen?" "Yeah," Caleb said, his face softening. "She's gone. She won't be bothering us again." He gestured for Marcus to leave. The assistant nodded, looking relieved, and slipped out the door. Caleb walked over to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The snow was starting to fall again, just like that night 8 years ago, but this time he wasn't alone. Maya came up beside him. "You did it." "We did it," Caleb corrected. He turned to face her. "Maya, I don't know where to start." "Start with, I'm sorry," Maya said softly. "I am," Caleb said, reaching out to take her hands. "I am so incredibly sorry. I was young and I was stupid and I should have trusted you. I let her poison my mind. I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me." "You broke my heart, Caleb," Maya said, tears pricking her eyes. "I hated you for a long time. When the boys asked about their father, I had to make up stories because the truth hurt too much." "I know," Caleb whispered, "and I will spend the rest of my life trying to fix that. I'm not asking you to forgive me today.
I'm not asking you to move back to Chicago. I know you built a life in Austin." "I did," Maya nodded. "A good life." "Then I'm coming to Austin," Caleb said. "What?" "I can run Sterling Properties from anywhere," Caleb said, glancing back at the boys, who were now building a fort out of sofa cushions. "I'm opening a regional office in Texas. I'll get a place near you. I want to drive them to soccer practice. I want to help with homework. I want to date you, Maya, properly this time. No galas, no mothers, no pressure. Just coffee, dinner, us." Maya looked at him. She looked for the arrogance of the billionaire, but she didn't find it. She saw only the man who had flown through a storm and taken down his own mother to protect his family. "Austin is hot," Maya warned, a small smile playing on her lips, "and the tacos are better than the pizza." "I can learn to love tacos," Caleb smiled back. "And the boys, they're a handful. Leo asks a million questions and Liam never stops moving." "I have a lot of energy to burn," Caleb said. Maya squeezed his hands. The wall she had built around her heart 8 years ago didn't disappear, but a door opened. "Okay," she whispered. "Come to Austin." Caleb leaned in, resting his forehead against hers. "Thank you." "Daddy, Mommy," Leo shouted from the cushion fort. "Come inside. The floor is lava." Caleb pulled back, grinning at Maya. "Well, you heard the boss." "We better hurry," Maya laughed. Caleb Sterling, billionaire, CEO, and former prisoner of his own legacy, took off his expensive suit jacket and threw it on the floor. He picked up Maya, swinging her over the lava as she shrieked with laughter, and dropped her safely onto the couch next to their sons. He jumped in after them, the 4 of them tangling together in a heap of laughter and limbs. Outside, the snow continued to fall on the cold, gray city of Chicago, but inside the office, it was warm. The deception was over. The truth had won. And for the first time in his life, Caleb Sterling wasn't focused on the buildings he owned, but on the home he was finally, truly building. "I did it for you," Victoria screamed, her poise finally shattering. "I did it for the family. She wasn't one of us, Caleb. She would have dragged you down to her level. I was protecting the legacy." "You didn't protect the legacy," Caleb said quietly. "You destroyed it." He pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket and slid it down the long table. It spun across the polished wood and came to a stop right in front of Victoria. "What is this?" she whispered. "It's a choice," Caleb said. "Option A, you resign immediately from the board. You surrender all voting rights and you retire to your estate in Florida. You will have 0 contact with me, Maya, or the boys. Ever." Victoria stared at him, her lips trembling. "And option B?" "Option B," Caleb said, leaning forward, his eyes blazing. "I hand this USB drive to the district attorney. You go to prison for embezzlement, fraud, and blackmail. And I let the press know exactly why the great Victoria Sterling is wearing an orange jumpsuit." The silence stretched for an eternity. Victoria looked at the document. She looked at Maya, who was standing tall, looking not vengeful, but simply done. She looked at her son and realized for the first time that she had created a man she couldn't control. With a shaking hand, Victoria picked up a pen. She signed the resignation letter. She threw the pen down. "You're a fool, Caleb. You're trading an empire for a sentiment." "I'm trading a prison for a life," Caleb replied. "Get out." Victoria Sterling, the woman who had ruled Chicago real estate for 30 years, picked up her purse. She walked past the board members who refused to meet her eye. She walked past Maya, pausing for just a second to glare, but Maya didn't flinch. When the door closed behind her, the tension in the room snapped. "Mr. Sterling," the vice chairman cleared his throat, "regarding the acquisition of Nexus." "There will be no acquisition," Caleb said, turning to look at Maya. "However, Ms. Brooks and I have discussed a partnership. Sterling Properties will be the exclusive licensor of Nexus technology. We will modernize our buildings, and Nexus will gain a national platform. It will be a merger of equals." He looked at Maya. "Is that acceptable to the CEO?" Maya smiled, a real smile, the first one that had reached her eyes in 8 years. "It's acceptable, but the branding stays Nexus. I'm not changing the name." "Agreed." Meeting adjourned. 10 minutes later, Caleb and Maya walked into his private office. The scene that greeted them was chaos. Marcus was sitting on the floor, wearing a tie that was crooked, surrounded by burger wrappers. Leo was wearing Caleb's spare suit jacket, which swallowed him whole, and Liam was spinning in the executive chair, laughing hysterically. "Daddy!" Liam shouted, stopping the chair. "Marcus let us eat 2 burgers." Caleb laughed. It was a rusty sound, something he hadn't used in a long time, but it felt good. "You guys okay?" "We're great," Leo said. "Did you talk to the Queen?" "Yeah," Caleb said, his face softening. She's gone. She won't be bothering us again. He gestured for Marcus to leave. The assistant nodded, looking relieved, and slipped out the door. Caleb walked over to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The snow was starting to fall again, just like that night 8 years ago, but this time he wasn't alone. Maya came up beside him. You did it. We did it, Caleb corrected. He turned to face her. Maya, I don't know where to start. Start with, I'm sorry, Maya said softly. I am, Caleb said, reaching out to take her hands. I am so incredibly sorry. I was young and I was stupid and I should have trusted you. I let her poison my mind. I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me. You broke my heart, Caleb, Maya said, tears pricking her eyes. I hated you for a long time. When the boys asked about their father, I had to make up stories because the truth hurt too much. I know, Caleb whispered, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to fix that. I'm not asking you to forgive me today. I'm not asking you to move back to Chicago. I know you built a life in Austin. I did, Maya nodded. A good life. Then I'm coming to Austin, Caleb said. What? I can run Sterling Properties from anywhere, Caleb said, glancing back at the boys, who were now building a fort out of sofa cushions. I'm opening a regional office in Texas. I'll get a place near you. I want to drive them to soccer practice. I want to help with homework. I want to date you, Maya, properly this time. No galas, no mothers, no pressure. Just coffee, dinner, us. Maya looked at him. She looked for the arrogance of the billionaire, but she didn't find it. She saw only the man who had flown through a storm and taken down his own mother to protect his family. Austin is hot, Maya warned, a small smile playing on her lips, and the tacos are better than the pizza. I can learn to love tacos, Caleb smiled back. And the boys, they're a handful. Leo asks a million questions and Liam never stops moving. I have a lot of energy to burn, Caleb said. Maya squeezed his hands. The wall she had built around her heart 8 years ago didn't disappear, but a door opened. Okay, she whispered. Come to Austin. Caleb leaned in, resting his forehead against hers. Thank you. Daddy, Mommy, Leo shouted from the cushion fort. Come inside, the floor is lava. Caleb pulled back, grinning at Maya. Well, you heard the boss. We better hurry, Maya laughed. Caleb Sterling, billionaire, CEO, and former prisoner of his own legacy, took off his expensive suit jacket and threw it on the floor. He picked up Maya, swinging her over the lava as she shrieked with laughter, and dropped her safely onto the couch next to their sons. He jumped in after them, the 4 of them tangling together in a heap of laughter and limbs. Outside, the snow continued to fall on the cold, gray city of Chicago, but inside the office, it was warm. The deception was over. The truth had won. And for the first time in his life, Caleb Sterling wasn't focused on the buildings he owned, but on the home he was finally, truly building.